Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a new era. First of all, there's Mr. Replant with his shirt on. If you're listening in your typical podcast app, you're not seeing it. But if you're watching on YouTube, welcome, YouTubers. This is fun. We're going to get to see each other as well as hear each other. For those of you who prefer to listen and do the podcast in the way that we've always done it in the past, all of those apps are still available, but we're adding YouTube. So Mark, help me try to remember, why did we decide to go visual?
Because people have been saying that we look better than we sound. So we just figured we would I've heard it a lot. They see us in person, they go, man, you guys look really great. You really need to be on YouTube. You've got a face for YouTube. So here we go. There you go.
Okay. I'm glad you heard that because I have not. Okay. To our YouTube audience, and if you're listening new as well on the podcast, on the audio, this podcast is called Revitalize and Replant. By the time you listen to us, we're well into many episodes, but this is our first that is on YouTube with Thom Rainer and Clifton.
By the way,
yeah, why don't you interrupt?
Yeah, that's okay.
That's fine.
You know, my artwork is like really expensive and really avant-garde. It looks like you got like a piece of motel art back there over your shoulder, kind of there.
Okay, I'll tell Mel Joe you said that.
A little ship, that's true. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'll tell her what you thought of her painting. So, motel artwork.
It's a nice motel. I mean, a good.
Oh, you're backtracking there. Now, if you dig in a hole, all it does is get deeper. We'll just move on. And you might want to just say that's an apartment.
I am in an apartment. I know. I'm temporary. Mrs. C and I are building a house, and so we moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 cats. And I'm down. She's kicked me out for a while. I'm down in the clubhouse area doing this from the clubhouse. So, yeah.
Well, I got to say, everybody sees different things in abstract. I see Pegasus. I see the horse, the wings, the feet. I see Pegasus. I don't know what you see.
I see Ronnie Floyd.
Okay. Yeah. I can see that as well, Mark. But I see Pegasus. I see Pegasus. It makes me want to run and fly and all of those. This particular podcast, for those of you who have not joined us in the past, this particular podcast is not just sponsored by the North American Mission Board and churchreplanters.com. It's probably more accurate to say that this is their podcast. I host and the Church Answers team gets it done, but almost every episode, every now and then I'll go rogue and do a solo, but almost every episode is either going to be Mark Clifton or the president of North American Mission Board, Kevin Ezell. So this is really the podcast of Revitalize and Replant, or one of the podcasts, but we call it the sponsor. And here's the taglines that you will hear again and again. More than 10% of churches in North America are at risk of closing. The North American Mission Board is committed to reversing this trend by decreasing the death rate of existing churches and simultaneously increasing the birth rate of new churches. To learn more about what it means to become a replanting pastor or to explore all the resources, go to churchreplanters.com or go to namb.net, either of those 2 places. Okay, let me set this one up for you, Mark. Somebody has come in to lead a revitalization. It could be a replant, but this probably works better with a revitalization. Someone has come in to lead a revitalization. They're gung-ho. All the members say that they're on board. Everybody they've talked to said, yeah, we're for change. And then they have this unspoken parenthetical comment that says, as long as it does not affect my life, we're ready for change. And then the pastor starts getting out in the community, having coffee, breakfast, lunch with people, getting to know the merchants, and the critics come in and they say, you're never in the office. Why don't you keep office hours? And believe it or not, I know you believe it. This is not Ripley's. Believe it or not, this complaint is common. And undoubtedly, in the course of working with the thousands and thousands of church leaders, pastors with whom you work, you have heard that as well.
I have. I heard it just recently. A friend of mine a mega church pastor, actually, a very successful one, retired and went to help a church in transition, a church that was in desperate need of help. And he was doing a really great job, but he got called on the carpet by a group of the members because he wasn't keeping office hours. And he's just the transitional interim, but they thought he should be in there from 8 to noon every day. And his response,
8 to 9.
That's it. Yeah, just 8 to noon every day. I won't tell you some of the response, but yeah.
You've heard me tell this story, but the likelihood is you've forgotten it, so I'm going to tell it anyway. I had a deacon, he was deacon chairman at one time, but a deacon who not every day, but randomly enough where I was on edge, would show up in the parking lot before 8 and show up in the parking lot right before 5. And if my car wasn't there, he would call me. So I had to be there before 8, and I had to not leave until after 5. And if there happened to be an emergency somewhere, or I'm just visiting the hospital somewhere, he basically said I needed to be omnipresent. I need to figure out a way to stay in the office more. He monitored me, and I never knew which days he was going to monitor me. And so I would go to work with a sense of paranoia. Isn't that fun?
I love it. I love it.
Okay, let's help these pastors when they have these type of church members that expect you to keep unreasonable office hours. First thing we say is so basic. Find out why. Listen to them. Listen to what they.
It's easy just to disregard it. In fact, what normally happens when I talk, especially to younger pastors, who the idea of keeping office hours, the idea of even having an office, I mean, they are just mobile, right? They don't even need an office. Is foreign to them,
right?
That when usually it's an older saint says, our other pastor used to keep office hours. Generally, what he does is he just kind of opens up and says, well, that doesn't make any sense. And he gives all the reasons why he's not going to do it, and why he doesn't need to do it, and why it isn't helpful. Which, when you're dealing with geriatrics like myself, the first thing you need to do.
This is a geriatric podcast, by the way.
When you're dealing with geriatric, and really, actually, when we talk about replanting, one of the 16 characteristics is an ability to deal with geriatric generations. And when you deal with that older generation, you always have to ask why and listen. Let them tell you. Sometimes they just need to tell you. And so if you start out by telling them why you're not going to do it, without ever listening to them of why they want you to do it, you've already dug yourself a hole.
And brings up that second point, you've already referred to it. We'll look at it again. Recognize that many members deal with old paradigms. I mean, just think about some of the paradigms of my younger pastoring days, your younger pastoring days. You have to be at the hospital no matter what the issue is, even if it is ingrown toenail that's gotten infected in outpatient, but you're supposed to be at the hospital. You're supposed to do the counseling. You are the counselor. And, Mark, when I started doing counseling as a pastor, I quickly got out of it. And I didn't have to get out of it because everybody that came to me for counseling said they felt feeling worse. And so they didn't come back again. So I kind of worked myself out of a job. But those are the old paradigms. The pastor is the counselor. The pastor is the only one who visits the hospital. The idea of equipping the saints to do this work of ministry sometimes does not cross the minds of these members. And one of the issues is they are dealing with those old paradigms.
If you ask them, why do you think I need to keep office hours? You'll get a variety of answers. Some will be something as simple as, well, that's what pastors do. That's how we know you're working. What are you doing? You stay at home watching TV. I mean, but you need to let them tell you that. You need to let them express that. Also, and here's another reality. The longer the former pastor has been away, they probably had some really great pastor back in their past, right? And he was probably pre-social media, pre-iPhone, right? And so they identify with him, with the guy who was in the office. My father was a pastor for 50 years, and it was important for him to be in the office a couple hours a day so he could take calls and answer calls because he didn't have a mobile phone, right? And so if you need to talk to the pastor, you knew he'd be there.
That's a good point. There were no cell phones in
and
those
so
days.
back in those days, it was important. My dad would try to stop by the office a couple hours every morning to get his messages, to return his calls, so they didn't back up. And people would know that you could meet Brother Harry. He'd be in the office from 10 to noon or 9 to noon most days, unless he had something going on. Well, for many older saints, they feel like they've lost so much that's changing. And, the pastor, you may not preach behind a pulpit. You may not wear a suit and a tie. There's a lot of things you don't do that other pastor, that previous generations did, that their paradigm says a good pastor does. And now you're not in the office. And so what they're going to say is, how do I get in touch with you? Of course, you're going to say, well, I got a phone with me all the time. But there's this sense in which their paradigm, as you said, is really locked in. And I want you to know their paradigm's locked in, not because they're just old and curmudgeon-y like me, but because everything else in their life and their culture is changing so drastically. They just can't take much more change. And this is just one more way they've got to adapt to a pastor in a different way. And so your answer to that is to just care for them and love them and help them understand why you hear their pain and their concern, but why you think it's best for them if you do something different.
I'm going to come back to this when we get to the fourth point, but just as a obvious reminder, COVID changed so much too. And so for those who were used to working in offices, particularly millennials, Gen X, younger Gen Xers maybe, and certainly Gen Zers, if they're now in this, the office is archaic to many of these. And we'll come back to that, because I want to talk about it in the fourth point. But things have changed dramatically. COVID has exacerbated many of the issues that were present, and now many of these, particularly maybe 40 and under pastors, are saying, why do I need to be in office? I mean, I'm going to work in my home and let the kids run around.
40 or 50 and older members are saying that they understand it as a way to be able to connect to their pastor, to know he's there, to know I can reach him. He's there if I need him. Even though I may not need him, I know he needs to be there in case we need him. Otherwise, why do we know what he's doing? In other words, is he home just playing with the kids? Is he watching TV? Is he playing video games? I mean, what's he doing? And frankly, if you're a younger person, you're okay with that multitasking. You're okay with kind of watching the kids and also being available through email and social media and telephone. You're okay with that. But older generation, not so much. And if you're trying to revitalize a church, again, listen to them, let them tell you that. Don't just immediately discount it. Embrace the fact that they want to be able to connect with their pastor, and let them share that with you. And just realize, like so many things, Dr. Rainer, it's tactical patience. We'll get to some issues.
Yeah, love that. That's one of my favorite phrases of yours. Tactical patience. I love it. After you've heard them, after you've listened to their perspectives, then comes the chance to let them know what ministry responsibilities are taking you out of the office. You don't throw that up as your defense right away. You listen, but you say, I understand. Let me just give you an idea of some of the things I'm doing when I'm not in the office.
And give them some examples of how you've encountered and engaged people outside of the office, and how you want to really make a presence for the congregation in the community, and that you're doing those things. I want to be cautious about this because some guys are really pushed back on it. But I have, in the interns that I've had in my ministry, and sometimes they've gone to churches like this, I've suggested that it's all right, especially if he's a younger pastor, to sort of give a ministry log of what you do each week, not hour by hour. But there's nothing wrong with saying, I went to this coffee shop to meet these people, I visited this. I think it's okay, because when they say we need you in the office, sometimes what's underneath that is we don't know what you're doing, and we want to know what you're doing.
It's a control.
And look, if you can't put a ministry log together, some of my interns have pushed back on me and go, I don't want to do that. Wait, whoa. If you can't put a ministry log together, we got another issue. I mean, if maybe they're right. Maybe you aren't doing what you ought to be doing. Because for a lot of revitalizing pastors, the hardest thing about a ministry log would be putting it all on one page. I mean, you do so much every day. So I think that would be one way of dealing with that.
All right, let's go back to this whole issue of what has happened during COVID. Things have obviously changed. That's an understatement. It's almost become cliche right now. There's a whole different idea of what is taking place. Let me give you one example. I saw 2 ministry positions opened at the same organization, good ministry positions. And of all the things that were in the advertisement as they were looking for people, it said, this job requires you to relocate to Nashville. You will need to be in the office. Now, think about that. How in the past, how many times did we have to say that, oh, you need to come to this town and you need to be in the office? That's how much times have changed, because people have the expectation that they're not going to be. They can stay where they are and work remotely, and that their office is wherever their screen happens to be at the time. So it is a different world when you have to state up front that you have to move and you have to be in the office. So what I'm saying is the world has changed, and maybe you can communicate that change to the leaders in the church or just the members, and just work out some kind of compromise. Compromise is not bad on something as, I don't want to call it trivial, but pretty mundane as office hours.
I want to, again, I want to be careful. I want to be a total curmudgeon. But, sometimes maybe you don't need to do all your sermon prep at Starbucks just because your buddies do it. Maybe you could actually do some of your sermon prep in the office. I know that's really wild and weird, but maybe you spend a few hours a week. And I realize sometimes you say, well, if I'm in the office, I get interrupted. I can't do that and all, but you can make it work out. And so maybe, do some of that may be part of your compromise. You're going to spend a few hours a week there. And you tell, the secretary, if you have one, that unless it's an emergency, you're doing sermon preparation, but do that there. Like I said, and then make a ministry log and let them know what you're doing and just walk them through this. Again, it's just tactical patience. And also we talk about being a visionary shepherd. That may be your vision that, I don't need to be in the office. Look, one of the first churches I replanted at Warnell, they had this kind of big office complex. They had 18 people, right? Literally 18 people, but they had a pretty good sized office complex with 3 offices and a workroom and a reception area. You get it. But they had no place to drink coffee and to hang out after worship because it was just an old building built in 1921. And the architecture said, get yourself in here, sit down, then get yourself out. And so it wasn't that greeting kind of place. So what did we do? Well, first thing, we let the part-time secretary go so we could use that money for ministry outside the church. And then we tore out the office suite and made it a welcome area and a coffee area. And I didn't use much tactical patience with that. And in retrospect, I should have. But when you do things like that, that may be my vision, and that may be a good vision. And hopefully it's the vision the Lord's given me. But you've got to be a visionary shepherd, which means only to the degree that you shepherd these people, they're going to follow you along. So don't expect them to change immediately. But as you love them and care for them and shepherd them, share the vision with them. And hopefully enough of them, never all of them, but enough of them will buy into it.
I had to do what you are saying in my last pastorate because of the deacon who checked on me. And I had to do my sermon prep, and it wasn't that much of an issue back in those days going to coffee shops. That became cool later. But I needed a place to do uninterrupted sermon prep. And so it worked out well. I kept office hours, but I went to another room in the church to do my sermon prep. My assistant in the front knew that if anybody came in and they said, is Tom there? That yes, he's working on his sermon right now. Do I need to interrupt him or something to that effect? But I went to another place because if a church member was there and I'm working on my sermon, they would stick their head in, and a common conversation would be, hey, what, you doing anything? Well, I'm working on my sermon. Oh, good. I'm glad you're not busy. Can we talk? And
yeah, we've heard you preach. But the compromise, some pastors, we just feel like everything is a test of my leadership, right? So I can't budge on this because it's a test of my leadership. I remember Johnny Hunt told me one time he had one of his interns that went to a dying church and was trying to replant it, and just people were just pushing back on him at every every step. And Johnny said he got a text from the guy that said, now, they want me to wear a tie when I preach. And that's the last straw. And so Johnny said, I texted him back and I said, you got a minute for a phone call? And yeah. Johnny said, he got him on the phone. He said, you got something to write down with? He said, yeah, I'll give you the answer. Okay. And Johnny said, here's the answer. The guy says, okay. Johnny says, wear a tie when you preach. there comes a time it's not worth dying on, spend a couple hours in the office. I'm not telling you to give up your leadership, but I'm telling you, tactical patience, visionary shepherd, love on them. And don't think they're going to change all those paradigms they have in a few weeks just because you showed up, or even a few months. But it's a process.
I'm sorry, Mark. I sympathize with the young pastor. I mean, wearing a tie, that's a hill to die on for me. The last time I wore a tie, and I don't think I'm wrong on this. Amy May can help a little bit. The last time I recall wearing a tie was Billy Graham's funeral.
Okay.
Yes. I don't think I've worn. I mean, how long has he been
deceased?
Maybe,
something like that.
I could look it up. Yeah, a couple of years. By the way, do you know that his home is for sale? By the time we air it, it's probably sold. The place he and Ruth and Billy, the cabin after Billy and Ruth got married. Yeah, it wasn't their final cabin, but it's it's really become a B&B, and it's one of the daughters owns it, and she has a child with medical problems, so they're selling it in order to take care of those issues. But I'm getting astray on this. All right, let's finish this up. Keep limited office hours where anyone can have access to you. That's not. I mean, it may be 2 days a week, 3 hours a day. It doesn't have to be onerous, but this whole thing about I never have to go into the office, it comes back to this lack of flexibility, of shepherding ability, quite frankly. If you are just going to die on every hill like this, if some people want you to keep office hours, keep some office hours. Go and compromise, right?
Michael.
Yes, he's nodding right. Okay. I mean, I would much rather be in an office 20 hours a week than wear a tie 1 day a year. So that's yes. I mean, those are.
I wear bolos now. I wear bolos, so that's what I wear.
Oh, good gravy train! Probably with the International Harvester hat too. Okay, Mark. This is our first YouTube.
I want to rate it on a 1 to 10. It might be like a 4.5. I think we got a lot of room for growth. I really do. I think we.
I would agree. You have a lot of room for growth, but you'll get there, Mark. You'll get there.
No, listen.
Well, we want to thank everyone.
You guys are good, and I enjoy being with you, Tom. And man, everywhere I go, people talk to me about the podcast, and I know we kind of joke around a lot, but man, it's encouraging. When I went to the Southern Baptist Convention, I had so many people come up to me because they saw the hat and they knew it was the podcast. And they would tell me, and Jill was with me, and they would say, man, I listened to that podcast. Sometimes I'm ready to quit. Sometimes I just need an uplift. And it was deeply appreciative. I was very appreciative of that, whatever I'm trying to say. It meant a lot to me. It was good. So.
I know. And it means a lot to me. It is an incredible ministry. I was recently at the Cove and got some of those same comments from that's the Billy Graham organization's retreat. Got a lot of comments about that. One of them was, what is Mark Clifton really like? And I said, listen to the podcast. That's what he's really like. There's not a stage presence than a real presence.
That's all you get.
Well, we thank you for listening to Revitalize and Replant, or watching if this is your excursion into YouTube for our podcast. We thank you for being a part of it. And once again, let me remind you to go to churchreplanters.com and to NAMB.net, NAMB.net. And always thank you for joining us at Revitalize and Replant. You can subscribe on the Church Answers YouTube channel. There's a new opportunity. There you go. And of course, at iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever your favorite podcasting app is. And continue to come back and see us and hear us as we get to help churches get healthier together.